We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
I have long held that Recimercial is a thing. I have long held that there are people in the residential space doing commercial.
I think you are onto something. I don't think you're the only one who's onto it, is my only point.
He really said, oh, you thought you created that? That's crazy.
No, I never claimed to create it. Absolutely. I heard this from somebody else like 10 years ago, right?
You actually coined the term. It's your picture next to the dictionary description.
The dictionary, on the Wikipedia page.
This is what they call serendipitous. Look that up in the dictionary, you'll see a picture of you and me.
Extron-HETMA partner up. Sonos jumps into commercial AV. And Snap and Control4 make controls simple. All that and more next on AVWeek. This is AVWeek, episode 682, recorded Friday, September 13th, 2024. Keep it simple. This is AVWeek, your weekly wrap-up of the biggest news and information we have gathered. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information, first and foremost, Steph Beckett from Rave. Welcome in.
Thank you very much for having me.
Also a young lady that I hung out with Steph last week, period, end of sentence. Another young lady I got to hang out with last week is Amal Reddy from Commercial Integrator. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
All three of us were in Denver for the CEDIA and CI Expo, which we'll talk about here in a bit. And last but not least, a young man who got to spend like 6 months in a walkabout in Down Under, Joe Andrulis from Biamp. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Tim. Always a pleasure.
I mentioned the fact that Steph, Amal, and I were all three at the CEDIA and CI Expo. That is where our first story comes to us from. Snap One, now of course a part of ADI, they introduced a completely new, redesigned, and reimagined user interface called Control4 X4. This is supposed to be a customer-driven post-installation system, tweaks and features. They've got some of them called routines and widgets. What really it comes down to is it gives users the ability to modify schedule routines for their own use. In other words, this is a user-generated, almost like user-generated content, only it's for your control system. And this is different than the if-then system that Control4 has had for a number of years. But it gives them, according to Control4 and according to Snap, it gives the users another level of control, another level of customability. Steph, we'll start with you on this. When you look at stuff like this and you see, Snap and Control4 introducing something like this, we have talked a lot in the industry about the customer experience, whether that customer is residential or whether that customer is on the commercial side. What does this do for the customer experience?
In my opinion, I think it's just simplifying a lot of things. I think that they're sunsetting their earlier program in order to rush this one in. They're giving people some time to switch over, but in the end, they're going to switch everyone over to X4. So I think that this is all about just simplifying the earlier processes that they had and listening to the customers about, oh, I wish I could set this up, like almost like it was a routine. So they really listened to a lot of what their customers were asking for in creating this. So this is also kind of just a continuation of what they have been working on and making it a little bit easier for the layman to use.
Amala, same kind of question. Well, if Control4 is 99.9% a consumer product. Yes, 100 years ago, they did commercial. They did a couple of hotels in Vegas a number of years ago, but they are a consumer home brand. Can you see something where another control manufacturer would do something similar like this in the commercial space, where they give, maybe not faculty, right? Let's not get crazy, and let's not give the CEO the power to do this, but a tech manager, an AV user, the ability to do something like this for their customers' experience?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because not only at CDS, CIX, but also at Infocom, we're seeing a lot of manufacturers giving control to the users, yeah, whether it's control management system or remote management system, where they're trying to, as Steph said, simplify the user experience. So I think it is there. It's something that I'm also seeing like what has been taken from residential and been brought into commercial as well, because it's the folks that I spoke to have said how they want to simplify it for the integrators as well as the customers. I think we're seeing a lot of that, not just with the control management systems, but even remote management systems. A lot of companies are investing in that heavily and using like a whole cloud interface to make it easier for customers, but also the integrators. So I think it's interesting to see how that trend is going.
Joe, Steph said part of this was from Snap and Control4 listening to the customers. When it comes to the manufacturer side, how do you get that? How do you create that feedback loop where you as the manufacturer are getting direct access to the AV users, to the IT director, to get back what it is they actually want, need, and desire?
Well, I mean, there's a variety of channels. I mean, certainly the integrators themselves provide a lot of insight. And we try to maintain direct contact with a lot of the larger customers that kind of represent, they're kind of like bell cow customers that represent the trendsetters and how they would like to, apply a particular technology or AV system experience to, new, environments that either exist or that are emerging, and use them to kind of test out different ideas. I kind of confirmed what, Steph and Amala had mentioned, that what we're seeing with what Control4 doing isn't just unique to the home space. This really is trying to, democratize access to some of these capabilities beyond dependency on, integrators or other channels, which could be a little kind of costly or time consuming to get it done. People want to kind of enable themselves. And we've seen that in the commercial space as well. Biamp wasn't a real control company historically. And when we decided, we really want to think about adding that to our portfolio, how do we want to go about doing this? There was the traditional option of, the full-on heavyweight, handle every case kind of a scenario. But truth be known, most scenarios are the simpler ones. And people want to keep it simple and be able to just get that done relatively quickly and easily. And we opted for more of a configuration than programming kind of a model that was more accessible to a wider variety of people, whether they're in the integration channel or in the users. But the idea is the same, right? Keep the simple things simple, get access to as many people with as little fuss as possible. And I think you're going to just spawn adoption. And I think what Control4 has done here is a bit of a representation of that idea.
I would also make the argument that the vast majority of control systems today are more in the configuration realm than they are in the traditional programming realm. And you can at me all you want, but I don't really care which control system you're looking at. They have a configuration version. I shared this on social media, and Mullen and Steph saw it. Crestron. Now it was a Crestron home system, so don't think I'm programming lines of code in simple Sharp. But they had basically it was a speed test on how fast you could configure a home system. It was a TV, an Apple TV, a display, and a lighting system. And at the time, I got the second highest speed, just for the record. I beat a couple of Crestron people out of it. But that was, again, I haven't touched a programming system in years. And when I did, I was horrible at it. So it's not a testament to me. It's more of a testament to how easy this stuff is really, really becoming. And again, as Joe was saying, it's a direct feedback from the clients and from the end users. All right, keeping on the CEDIA route, and this is where you're going to hear Tim talk about Recimercial, and I am not going to make any apologies for this in any way, shape, or form. Sonos has announced its first pro-grade speakers. It's called the Era 100 Pro and the Era 100 Pro Surface Mount. This is set to launch in early 2025. These speakers feature power over Ethernet, PoE technology, simplifying installation and reducing cost. Sonos has been working on this for I know for a fact, for at least 2 years, possibly 3 years, maybe even longer, but my knowledge base goes back at least 2 years. New models are built on the acoustic architecture of the Consumer Era 100. They offer quote unquote rich sound with wide dispersion. Sonos is also including a zones software feature for easier management of multiple speakers in large spaces, and a search API to enhance compatibility with third-party control systems. Okay. I have long held that Recimercial is a thing. I have long held that there are people in the residential space doing commercial. Sonos. Mm-hmm. Like Sonos. Like people have this in their house, Sonos.
Yeah, I've got one right here.
If I was at my house, I could show you mine, right? There it is. There's a Sonos. Amala, what do we think of a 100% traditional consumer? You can buy them at Best Buy or on Amazon. A consumer device in the commercial space.
I think it's interesting, but it's also what we have been talking about for a while. It's why we launched Commercial Integrator Expo, right? We saw that residential have been doing commercial projects for a while now. So I think it's coming from a whole place of where customers, integrators are asking residential, hey, do you also have the bandwidth to do commercial? And I think that's what Sonos is also tapping into. When I visited the Sonos booth at CIX and CEDIA, they were telling me about how they want to bring these products into retail spaces, into hospitality, but not in like a huge application. It's like for large spaces, yes, but in a contained zone, if I may say so, like smaller retail spaces or in healthcare centers, clinics as such, where they need that kind of listening environment, which provides the same kind of experience that we get from the Sonos home speakers, but in a commercial space. So I think it's really interesting how they're bringing new products into the commercial space, but it also speaks to the fact that the Recimercial trend is not a fad. It's something that we are seeing every single day, and it just reinforces the fact that CIX is needed at CEDIA.
I'm going to have Amala on more often because she's saying that I'm right. I'm just going to put that out there. Joe.
It's, as much as it would ever hurt me to affirm your point of view, I actually will go a little further and say I'm surprised you're surprised. Crossover products are been kind of a fact of life forever, right? I mean, there's always been, the iPhone. Wow, I mean, or smartphones in general, I should say, have really been a perfect example of a crossover product, and then across the other, that was effectively a personal communication device. If you remember back in the day, maybe you don't, but the amount of resistance to that coming into a managed business communication infrastructure was just all kinds of dust was kicked up around that. And now, of course, it's almost laughable to think that anybody working without it, people don't even have desk phones because they rely 100% on this for everything. And so, that was a massive, win for a crossover product. And there's people who have long taken, professional grade products back to their house because they wanted a big, massive lawnmower for their ridiculously sized home or whatever like that. Or a regular pickup truck wasn't enough and they needed a landscaper edition of whatever. And it crossed over into a person who never did anything but haul soccer equipment. So, for whatever thing motivates it, we've seen crossover products all the time. So, a lot of manufacturers use these as sort of opportunities, right? They get drawn into it almost accidentally at times, right? They build a product for one application. To their surprise, it's adopted pretty readily in some other ones. They formalize that by putting a new badge on it, and maybe they do a few custom features and so forth to make it perfect for that. And off they go. They become an entry into a new market. So I agree with you, Tim. I think you are onto something. I don't think you're the only one who's onto it, is my only point. But Recimercial lives.
He really said, "Oh, you thought you created that? That's crazy."
No, I never claimed to create it. Absolutely. I heard this from somebody else like 10 years ago, right? After the 2008 crash, there were residential. I mean, for quite frankly, residential dealers had to get in commercial.
Yes.
Quite frankly, to stay afloat, right? Because nobody was upgrading their house because they were losing them, right? In 2008, 2009, 2010. So yeah, I did not create it, but I 100% jumped on the bandwagon.
You actually coined the term. It's your picture next to the dictionary description.
The dictionary, on the Wikipedia page.
Yes.
On the Wikipedia
Yep.
page, Recimercial has my picture. If you're not watching the video, Steph, hold up the Sonos again, because I have a point to make here before
And
you
you're
get
not
your
yet
Sonos.
slow.
Amala said something about hospitality and retail. That's in my favorite barbecue joint. That very speaker.
Yeah.
It as the old saying goes, smaller than a bread box, right? That whole thing. But it's a decent sized speaker, and for my little barbecue joint, it works. But it's not a commercial grade version, right? It's no PoE. They have to plug it in. It's Wi-Fi and all that jazz. Steph, same kind of question, roughly, right? Is what do we think about this idea of this way? It's residential, and again, 100% a residential product going into the commercial realm and developing products for commercial, and quite frankly, possibly the other way around, where it's commercial finding their way in residential, or even in a residential area.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I will take a slightly different approach, but I agree with you. So I think that home AV products typically have a better user interface. And that's like a really big statement. So, sorry to anyone I'm offending, but AV is not as user-friendly always as it claims to be. Hence, there are CEOs that are breaking stuff all the time. Teachers go into a classroom, they don't know what's going on, they need help. So, I just don't always find them as user-friendly as they claim to be. But in home AV and residential AV, I think that they are already like that, because they're like, okay, well, maybe the person putting this controller in their house to control the sunshade, this awning that is on their back deck, maybe it is someone's grandma. In fact, it is my grandma who has a Somfy control in her house. So I think that they assume a little bit less about the people who are going to be using it. And so anytime I see more residential heavy manufacturers coming into commercial, I'm actually happy, because I'm like, great, they're going to take this knowledge that they have about, not assuming anything about the person who's going to be using the product, and they're going to put that heart of it into this commercial product. So I think that it might actually help us move into this new era of more actual plug and play.
That's actually a really good point. And you're probably right, where having the commercial side of folks take a better look at and take a better lead from the consumer side, right? Absolutely. All right, our last story here. Rave has it, commercial integrator, AVNation has it. It came across the wire. Extron has announced a strategic partnership with the Higher Education Technology Managers Alliance, also known as HETMA. This collaboration aims to revolutionize AV technology in U.S. higher education institutions. The partnership will focus on developing comprehensive training programs, promoting industry thought leadership, and driving continuous product improvement based on direct feedback from higher education AV professionals. This partnership represents a major step forward, quote unquote, in addressing the unique challenges faced by colleges and universities in implementing and managing advanced AV technology. Joe, when you look at this, right, this is an interesting step forward. Not the first group, not the first manufacturer to join HETMA, right? A number of manufacturers have joined as sponsors. There's HETMA certified products, but this is the first time that somebody's jumped on board and said, "Hey, we want you to help us with the education part," right? And that's where I want to start here. And really quick background, if you're not familiar, I started out in the AV as a tech manager. Crestron sent me to Crestron school. Extron sent me to Extron school. Biamp sent me to Biamp school, right? And this was 20 years ago. So this idea is not necessarily new. But how important, Joe, is it for the AV user, right? The higher education in this instance, but also corporate on the other side. How important is it for those users to be educated by the manufacturers?
Well, if we're defining, the user as literally the final end user on the whole thing, it disappoints me if you tell me they have to be highly educated. I'm going to kind of reinforce Steph's point here, which is that represents a bad solution to a previous failure. Now, notwithstanding that, I totally support engaging with organizations to improve communication, understand user needs more accurately, and so forth. But again, I feel like the best AV system or technology system all is the one that transparently supports the user to pursue what they're really there to do. And it's rarely to say, fidget with the technology, right? That's not why they go use technology. And so, the hope is that technology users will be the ones to do the learning, not the users. And the developers should be the ones who are learning what their failures are that require that the user have to go and get into our world. So I don't know the specifics of this. So I absolutely applaud people engaging more with users. So I don't want any way to come across, negative about that. But my overall feeling in our aspiration is that, our technology should learn the user should learn our technology, and our goal as a manufacturer should be to keep pursuing that vision relentlessly.
And I should have said this a little bit better. So HETMA and this education is not for the end user, right? This is not for faculty and staff. This is for, the
people deploying the technology.
Yes.
And that's why I say, for this one in particular, I think it's a pretty good thing, right? I think engaging with them is a very, very effective, a very laudable goal, right? Yeah. Again, even there, we're still looking for how do we even lower the bar there, right? I mean, our previous comments about how do we reduce the barrier to applying control by making it more configuration-based and a little less programming, except where programming is really the best way to get it done. That's just one example, but there's many, many, many along the way that, that just reduce the barriers to people putting this great technology to work, regardless of what their job title is.
Steph, when you look at this, how can other manufacturers, quite frankly, develop education for however I would call them, tech managers, IT directors, that the folks who are responsible for managing and maintaining these systems, whether that's in corporate or higher education?
This is a hard question, and I think that's why there aren't more of these programs in place right now, because it's one, developing education that you think they should know, and two, it assumes that you know all of who those people are. And Tim, you and I have talked about how it's really hard to even find all of the end users in our industry, because a lot of them don't even know that they're in our industry.
And their titles are so weird.
It's so weird. Yeah. So I think, first of all, I'm applauding all of the manufacturers who are doing something like this, because I think it is really going to be important in bringing more end users into our industry. But I think that, you have to take a step back. There are the things about your products and the things that make them work that you think are important for integrators to know. And that's going to be the really nitty gritty, all of the specs, because of course integrators need to know this if they are the ones who are going to be implementing this into a space. But in order to have the day-to-day, it's not that you need less knowledge, it's that you need different knowledge. So I think separating those two things and building a curriculum based off of what does someone need to know in the day-to-day to make this work, and what does someone need to know in the day-to-day so that we can understand how it's actually being used. We know how it's built to be used, but we don't know how people are actually using this in their spaces, and that's going to be something important for the end users that they can bring into this training and offer back to the manufacturer. So I actually think this is going to be really useful in a two-way communication type way.
Amala, same kind of question is how can manufacturers do this, as good, or how can they kind of play off of this and develop more education for the IT and the AV tech?
Yeah, it's interesting because this story is something I just saw when you shared it recently, but I did another story a couple of months or almost a year ago about Pace University's minor AV track, which when I spoke to George Miller and the bald AV guys, basically, everybody knows them. So they were telling me that when they, George Chaco and Rich Miller, sorry, I messed up both their names. I put both the names
You
together.
combined their names.
I combined their names, so they're going to be mad at me.
Now together, the bald AV guys are now known as George Miller. I just want to say that now. They can yell
Yeah,
at
it's
you later,
Rich
but
Chaco and George Miller. There we go. Exactly. But no, wonderful people, and they have such a passion for bringing this AV education that we're talking about. And when we're talking about their minor AV track, they told me that they'd consulted with AVWeek, they had consulted with Crestron and a bunch of other manufacturers to build a whole AV track. So it's not any specific manufacturer focus, but it's trying to educate these young students about the best practices and the best products to build a whole system together. They even talked about how they, instead of a capstone project, they had like this fun kind of like an exam where the students had to build their entire system. Like they had to build a whole design proposal, the wiring and everything, and they would lose points if they exited the room to get something new. So they were trying to really enforce their creativity and innovation in these students. And they say one student was so smart, she went out, but she never came back, and she just handed the others the products they needed, so she got away from without losing points. So they're like, it's just very interesting to see that these children are very passionate about learning about AV and learning about IT, and for that matter, and it just shows that manufacturers can invest in such kind of education programs without making it seem like it has to be that manufacturer only.
Yeah.
I think it can be focused on best practices, best ways to integrate these products, how can they resolve problems for customers. And I think that education is so important because when these people come into the industry, they already come armed with that knowledge. So they can break into the industry faster, rise up better, and they already know the manufacturers by then. So I think it's really cool.
I will say that some of the best education I've had in the industry, and I've gone through a lot of different courses, they do that very thing, Amala, where they start out with the basics, right? I don't care if it's an audio, if it's a speaker manufacturer, if it's a control system, they will start out with the basics, right? This is what you need to know. This is how audio performs. This is the basis of AV over IP. Yes, eventually they will get to their product. They have to. That's how that works. But the best ones out there are the ones that actually give you the education on the baseline. Absolutely. All right. Thank you guys so much. Steph Beckett from Rave and also from AV Buyers Club, which she's going to talk about here in a second. How do people connect with you or Rave or AV Buyers Club?
Sure. So you can go read Rave at ravepubs.com. You can go to AV Buyers Club, which is our end user facing publication. So if you are more of an end user, you'll probably prefer this site instead, and that's avbuyers.club. And then Rave Pubs is on all the socials. I'm also on all the socials and most active on Twitter at Steph L. Beckett.
Amala Reddy from Commercial Integrator. Thank you, ma'am. How do people connect with you or CI?
Yeah, sure. You can reach me on LinkedIn under Amala Reddy. I'm also available on Twitter under the same handle, Amala Reddy. And please do visit our site, commercialintegrator.com. And for those who are interested in the residential markets, we have cepro.com as well. So please visit our sites and hope you enjoyed this.
All right, very good. Mr. Androulis, thank you, sir. How do people connect with you or BuyAmp?
All right, well, to learn more about BuyAmp and all the great things that we offer the commercial sector, you can visit us at www.buyamp.com. And me personally can be reached probably best at LinkedIn, where you'll find me, Joe Androulis, as one of the only Androulises in the whole directory.
for me, for Tim Albright, don't follow me anywhere, especially on the Twitters, because I'm going to talk about the Bears. If you want to hear me or see me write about something other than AV, you can check me out on LinkedIn. But go by the website, if you would, please, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. We have a brand spanking new podcast called AV Career Mastermind, hosted by our friend Jen Weaver. She interviews people that are looking for a job, people who have got a job, but giving you advice on how to get a job. There have been a number of folks who have, quite frankly, been laid off, lost their job, or are looking for new opportunities. Check that out. Jen has a number of really great interviews. She has a really interesting one coming down the pipeline, talking about veterans and veterans getting into the AV industry coming down the pipeline. So you can check all that out and more at AVNation.tv. If you're watching the video on YouTube, then you can check us out on the podcast by any place you get your podcast, right? I don't know, iTunes or Stitcher or wherever. Or if you're listening to the podcast and you want to see these fine folks and what they look like, you don't want to see me, you can go to YouTube. So vice versa, it's entirely up to you. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Hello, this is Steve Greenblatt, host of AVNation's State of Control podcast. Each month, Rich Fregosa and I explore trending topics related to control programming and automation in the audiovisual industry. We speak with a variety of AV professionals who share their perspectives, knowledge, and experiences. Please join us for this monthly conversation. Check out A State of Control on avnation.tv or wherever you get your podcasts.